After several weeks of being relatively quiet, the CFL has come out with a new proposal for a new season. What do we think about the idea? Let's dive down that rabbit hole. We learned the other day that the CFL is now proposing a 6-game regular season, and then 8 teams out of the 9 make it into the playoffs. Rick Zamperin, brilliant or something else?
What's that emoji? The palm to the face? Listen, no, this just can't happen. 6 games? Seriously, this is a 9-team league. I understand we are in unprecedented times, but 6 games? Can't happen.
Bubba?
This reminds me of the Canadian Elite Basketball League tournament. Like, is this what it is? Are we that desperate for football in this country that we're going to put together something like this? You know, I have said this from the very beginning. Pack it up, pack it in, get us ready for 2021, period.
Steve, is it 3 for 3 so far, or do you take a different position?
I take a bit different position in that if they can get the hub situation, it's the only way that works. But go to what the original plan was, and that is 8 game. That means everybody plays everybody. This is about getting 2 extra. They think if they're able to have some fans in, 2 extra home games, right, for 2 different teams, 1 in each conference, right? Then you'd have that. But I agree that it renders the first 6 games kind of irrelevant, other than as let's see who's on the teams, essentially. So I would try to make it a more relevant regular season with 8. It'd still be the same length, right? And then go to the playoffs, and then you have to play with it then, because you don't know if you can still have it in the hub city, or if you can still have it, or whether you'll be able to go back to the teams in question. I would actually just make the Grey Cup the only game that they look like they're going to play outside of it. I would forget everything else. I think it's too expensive, and that's where Bubba's point comes in. He made this point many months ago, is that when does it become more financially costly to play? And I think the more you travel, the more that comes into play. So you could maybe make a case for a Grey Cup, but then you have to do that within a week and get that all together. So.
We've had an argument or a comment in the CFL for years that games really don't matter much until Labor Day. Labor Day is when the CFL season really begins. If we believe that, that's a 9-game season that we can whittle it down to for really being meaningful games. And I just don't see how you go below 9, or as Steve says, 8 games where you play.
Well, you have to have an even number of games.
Yeah, but I'm saying 9 or even 8 where you play everybody. 6, the only thing 6 is going to accomplish, and then allowing 8 of the 9 teams in, is to fully and finally label one team as the biggest joke in all of sports. If you can't make it into the CFL playoffs and 8 of the 9 do, you know what this should be like? This should be like remember the WWF or WWE's retirement matches? This should be that. The team that doesn't get in the playoffs, the entire front office by rule must be fired.
Yeah.
Fired. And that would make it more interesting than play for something. And the quarterback can never come back to Canada again.
Well, one of the things that's different about the CFL, I mean, they have a lot of similarities in some ways, but one of the big things, 2 things, is the amount of money they have, and secondly, how they get that money. And of course, ticket prices are part of that, and are a big part of that economy. But they also don't have the safety net of accumulated funds that almost every other league has, other than, say, the CPL. And there's a few of the same owners there, but those costs aren't as big, right? And all the Canadians are already here. All the players are already here.
Steve, before I jump to Rick and Bubba, I want to go. That's a great point you bring up, a fascinating point about the money, because we did a show here about when Randy Ambrosie asked for the money. And at that time, he said, we are in desperate need. We cannot go ahead. We urgently right now need $30 million. And to the best of my knowledge, that's not been granted by the government. I've heard nothing about
Not yet.
So if we can't go ahead, this is Randy Ambrosie, if we are urgently needing $30 million, how do you even plan a season and propose to go ahead? Like, what happened to that urgent need for the money? It seems to me all you're doing is digging a much bigger hole for yourself.
Well, and that was Bubba's point in a lot of ways. It's the emphasis of the underpinning of Bubba's point. What they've been operating on so far is ownership capital and advance money. Very few people have actually, according to them, have asked for their deposits back. So they've been kind of operating on that. But that's a really good question, because this isn't going to happen without some help. And I think that's why they need to finalize it by a certain date, because they got to say, this is what it's going to cost us to get through. And that's what they need to present. And forget about the off season and 2020, 2021, whatever that's going to cost them to get through. They need to give them a specific dollar. And there's no doubt the feds are saying to them, we can't even comment on this till you say how much it's going to cost.
Rick, I don't. I mean, can you, if you're the CFL, can you have credibility with a request for cash if you start the season without federal cash? Or having said that to them, that we can't do this, that we're in desperate straits, if you start a season and don't have that infusion, do you lose all your credibility down the road for other requests?
Yeah, I think the CFL has really put itself in a rock and a hard place if it progresses with the start of the season, because just a few weeks ago we heard that there wouldn't be a campaign unless they got this federal infusion of money, and that has not happened yet. Plans are being put in the works, obviously, to hopefully by Labor Day start a season. Maybe that money will be there, but if it is not, how can the league go through with the start of the campaign knowing that they desperately need this cash? And this is why I truly believe that they're wanting to have 8 of the 9 teams in the playoffs after this, truncated 6-game season, is because the league hopes that by sometime this fall that there's going to be a dwindling of cases, and some fans will be allowed back into stadiums. Maybe those games could be played in home stadiums, and those teams could get an influx of revenue. But I think it's pie in the sky thinking. I'm not sure you can plan that way. I think you go with a hub city and you let the whole season roll, and then maybe you play that Grey Cup in the top team in that final 2 pairing.
Bubba?
The more I hear of it, the more ridiculous it sounds to me. I mean, in the OUA, they play 8 games. The Northern Football Conference, they think they play 10. The Hamilton Hurricanes, I believe they play 10. I know there's special circumstances because of coronavirus, but a 6-game regular season, you're talking about a virus that is killing people. I don't want to hear about people in the stands. At least in this country, we are doing a marvelous job, or at least the best job we possibly can with this virus. And I'm thinking outside of sports here, right? So to even think about socially distancing anyone at Tim Hortons Field, I don't want to hear about it. And I say that with all due respect to the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who I love. Scott Mitchell, these guys have put together a marvelous program over there. And I say that to everyone in the CFL that do, run a wonderful league with pretty much limited funds, let's be honest, compared to the National Football League. So unless you can do this in Winnipeg, what are we talking about Hamilton and Burlington for, right? And Ontario is doing as best as it can. So you might as well, if you're going to do this in front of no one, in front of empty stands, do this in Winnipeg, where at least, some of the stadium is kind of on a campus, or do it in Saskatchewan, where the numbers have been incredibly low. So to me, the more I hear about this, the more I get frustrated with the whole concept, guys. I'm sorry.
I don't want to see people in the stands really either. I think the hub concept is the only way to go. And it's not just in the stands. You start as soon as you start having, if they had playoffs, that would be 2 games in the East, 2 games in the West. That's 4. That'd be 5 games in which you'd be moving people via airplane, and all of that. That means another industry has to be fully in place for you to be able to work that. Of course, you'd be taking charters, and there's no way you could do it on anything but charters in this situation, I think. But I just don't think that economics are there for what, to get a few people in the stands. So I think they want to play. I don't know if I agree with that they need to, but the continuity in this league is more important than it is in other leagues. They've never really had a season start up after not having a season. A couple of the other leagues have, right? They both hockey and the NFL have had seasons where that's happened.
But Steve, sorry to interrupt, but
Yep.
I get it, and as my mind has shifted a little bit since we first started talking about this about 3 months ago. I think that the people, or at least the public, there's an allotment here for change. for shutting down the season. I think there will be, I know I've said once before, out of sight, out of mind. Maybe I don't believe all of that totally anymore, because this is such a different circumstance. If this was a work stoppage or they couldn't figure out the CBA and they had no season, I'm 100% in, like, you got to play something. You got to play something. But
Well,
this
it's a
is
different.
this is a special circumstance with a disease, with
Well,
a pandemic.
the circumstances have changed, Bubba, and here's how they've changed. The other 4 leagues are going to play. The shadow is bigger. That's one of the differences.
And how good did they look? Look at the MLS.
We don't know yet. They haven't played yet.
The MLS have had to delay games now because one team was. Isn't it just sounding crazy to you guys now?
Well, I think they can pull the plug. And one thing they've got is some guinea pigs in front of them.
Right.
And that's what we've said on this show before. I don't know if I want to be the league that's the first guinea pig, because that's what they are.
Let me go back for just a second to the finances, because this was such a big story not that long ago, and it sort of just disappeared. Do we believe, because we don't really know, do we believe that the CFL is obviously trying to make plans to figure out how to do this, but do we believe that they will not step on the field unless they have some infusion of cash, or do we believe they may actually play and get themselves further into the financial hole and then just hope and pray, because there won't be fans, and just hope and pray the government comes through? Because to me, if they do the latter, you may be setting yourself up for bigger problems down.
I don't think that doesn't happen. The latter doesn't happen.
So they have to have you believe they have to have the government infusion before they start.
Some government.
I think so. I don't think the owners. I mean, consider the community-owned teams. Saskatchewan's of the world, the Edmontons of the world. Are they going to be invested financially in knowing that they're going to lose a lot of money if they have to, send 60-odd personnel or 80-odd personnel to Winnipeg, or maybe play a home game or visit another stadium if that's the case for a Grey Cup? I don't think any owner in the Canadian Football League is going to want to dig that deep, knowing that it might not end. They might play 2 or 3 games, and a second wave comes in, and half their team's decimated. Now they've floated all these millions of dollars into this product that doesn't have a finish line. I think unless they get the financial cash from the feds, this is not going to happen.
But Steve, I mean, you're probably the most in tune with this, with your history in the CFL. I brought this up before, and I'm getting there now. There is a lot of this country that don't want, especially with the amount of money that's been given out for aid for just the general Joe. I don't think people are happy about the CFL getting, quote, free money. Has Randy Ambrosie made a call to Roger Goodell and said, look, we got to put together a loan here, right? If it's not free money, why would the NFL not help out this situation here?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if that's part of what we hear behind this whole other part, which they better not do, that as a development league, as a home for development players and those kinds of things. I wouldn't be surprised. I can't imagine they didn't talk. I can't imagine, at least in general terms, they haven't talked. I mean, because the NFL has helped them before. But there's always a cost to that. And that could be, who knows? Maybe that's where that idea came, that there'll be a number of developmental players on each roster from the NFL. And that is a thin edge of a wedge you don't want. My mind.
The other thin edge is that if the CFL was somehow to decide to go ahead before there was some sort of government assistance, after that presentation Ambrosie made to the parliamentary committee, the credibility behind his request for $150 million, when you've said we're in desperate straits and can't carry on without a $30 million infusion, if you play without that money, to me,
I don't think they're going to.
Behind that 150 is gone. So
I don't think they can. So I get rid of that notion and what it looks like and that kind of thing. They know they made a horrible mistake there, and they're working behind the scenes to perception mistake. They're working behind the scenes to work on it. And they're talking to the government every day. I don't know to whom within the government, but they are. And first of all, you got to have your ducks in a row before you do anything.
You got to be ready. You got to be
ready, right? So you got to have a plan on both sides, the financial thing. And I'm sure the Players Association, I don't know this for a fact, but I can't imagine it hasn't been. The doubt that we're expressing here has been expressed to the Players Association. Hey, if we don't get any money, we're not doing this.
And Rick, I think that, to go back to your point, you can get ready to play. I'm not knowing. I don't really get the sense of who is really buying this 6-game concept, which basically sounds to me like a 6-game exhibition season, and the playoffs are the only thing that really count. I'm not sure this is, as Steve just said, the CFL lost the PR battle with that presentation. I'm not sure they're winning the PR battle anymore with this idea of this season.
No, I mean, your hardcore of hardcore fans are going to be excited that there's a potential that the CFL might, kick off this fall. But for most of those fair weather fans, they're going to look to other products that are going to be on the tube much earlier. And if the CFL comes about, yeah, they'll tune in, but not to the tune that they have in the past, knowing that it's only 6 games. One team is not going to make the playoffs after only a 6-game regular season. They're going to see it as, a big fat asterisk, as every season will this season, but this one more so than ever before. I just get the feeling that the Canadian Football League, which has been around for eons now, still does not have a treasure chest that it can dip into, and the league's been caught with its pants down and is now with its hand out asking the federal government for a boatload of cash. And we all know that initial meeting in Ottawa went horribly bad. There was no player representation there. The plan really stunk because it should have been a loan as opposed to a handout. They dropped the ball big time.
Bubba, one more thing. We are seeing baseball players who make millions of dollars say they're not going to play this year. They're going to forfeit their salary because they're concerned about COVID. How many CFL players are going to say, I'm going to pass on this season because, A, they're not making millions of dollars, and football is a far more head-to-head, close-quarter sport than baseball is. That's not even been discussed, that you may have a lot of players who decide to opt out of the season if they're allowed to by their contract.
Well, I would believe that would be built in, and you're right. That's a great point that you bring up, Scott. You're talking about now one of the greats of Major League Baseball, current great, and Mike Trout saying, "I just don't know if this is for me." And hey, let's not be foolish here. There are going to be CFL players that maybe at this point right now have looked beyond even playing a season because they are hitched onto something else financially to cover them for the rest of the year. There are going to be some big name players. I mean, we haven't even got into the CBA thing. I mean, we'll talk about a Mike Riley making over $750,000. How are they going to prorate his pay? Does he sit here and say, is it worth it for me to go up and fit to Vancouver? Yeah, there's a lot of things for these players to consider, even beyond just the sickness and in terms of the economics, if it's even worth it to play for a 6-game regular season. So this, what I'm calling it a CFL breakup tournament is what it sounds like to me. I think you're going to get lots of players to your question there, Scott, where they're going to say the time has already bypassed itself. We're now looking at, I mean, be honest. What's the earliest right now? If they said today, if I went on the 6 o'clock news at CHH and said there's going to be a season, when could we start a season at this point with training camp and all that needed to be done? At least the middle of September, right? So, like,
Well, and Rick,
but it would still end at roughly the same time. It'd only be a week or two later. So you'll soon forget when it started if it does start. I think you're right, though. You'll lose players. There will be players, especially marginal players, won't be worth it to continue their career.
Yeah, Rick, we got to wrap up. But the minimum wage right now in the CFL is what, 65, something in that neighborhood? Which means if you prorate it for a third of a season, you're asking players to come here and potentially risk their health for $20,000. That when you put it in those terms, man, I mean, if I'm a player down in the States, do I look at this and go, yeah, sure, $20,000 sounds good to me?
Canadian.
Yeah.
Canadian, yeah. Before taxes. And I know, a CFL source told me just this past week that there's a star player on the Hamilton Tiger Cats, regardless of the salary situation, but they have no interest in playing in a hub city unless that hub city is Hamilton. So there's going to be a lot of that going around, and certainly a lot, when you look at the financial pictures, a lot of players thinking it's just not worth it.
What do you think about the CFL's idea that's been proposed and other things involved with this? Let us know. Our Twitter handles have been on the screen. They'll be up again. We would love to hear from you. Subscribe down below so you get notified of all the videos that we do here. We would love to have you joining us every single time. Thanks for watching. We will talk to you again soon.